It started like any normal week. I'd clock in at 10 p.m., swipe my ID, grab the rolling cart, and start on the north wing, the science block. Most nights were routine. Mop floors, empty trash, disinfect desks, repeat. The campus was built in the 1970s. Long, narrow halls, faded linoleum floors, walls the color of old parchment. You could always tell where you were by the smell, bleach and dust in the classrooms, old paper and ink in the faculty offices. The only light came from the flickering fluorescence overhead, that constant, uneven hum that filled every gap of silence. That sound became my only companion most nights. But then came Tuesday, the night things began to shift. At exactly 12:47 a.m., I heard a knock, coming from the storage closet beside the chemistry lab. I froze. That closet was kept locked. I had the only key. I thought maybe it was one of the maintenance crew from the day shift who'd forgotten something. But when I opened the door, the air hit me. Cold, dense, like walking into a freezer. Nothing inside, just shelves of cleaning supplies, rolls of paper towels, and an old mop bucket. But as I stepped back, I noticed something new. A second mop leaning against the wall. Same brand, same color, but older. Dirtier. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe one of the day custodians left it behind. Still, something about the handle bothered me. It was damp, sticky, like someone had been using it recently. I finished my route, trying to shake it off. But the rest of the night didn't sit right. When I turned off the lights in the hallway, I saw movement, a shadow in the reflection of the window glass. Not moving fast. Just shifting, like someone was walking slowly behind me, but never catching up. You ever have that feeling where you sense a presence, but every time you turn, there's nothing there? That was my night. By 2:30 a.m., I made it to the basement level, the mechanical rooms and laundry. I saw that same mop again, propped neatly against the wall down there, though I'd left it upstairs. At that point, my stomach dropped. There were cameras in the hall, sure, but I wasn't about to radio security and sound crazy, so I just kept working. The following night, I decided to check the security monitors in the janitor's office during my break. It's a tiny room, no bigger than a closet, metal desk, old computer, half a dozen monitors showing live feeds of the hallways. At first, everything looked normal. Empty corridors, empty classrooms. Then, on camera 6, I noticed movement near the chemistry lab again. A figure, tall, thin, pushing a mop bucket slowly across the floor. At first, I thought it was me, maybe old footage looping. But I was in the office watching live. I stared harder. The figure didn't have any face under the shadow of the cap. Just the faint outline of a janitor's uniform. Like mine. When I blinked, the feed flickered, and the camera view reset. Empty hallway. I don't know how long I sat there staring, waiting for it to come back. But it didn't, at least not on the screen. When I stepped out of the office to check the hall, the mop bucket was waiting just a few feet from my door. Tell me, what would you have done? Would you go back in and pretend you never saw it? Or would you follow it, just to make sure no one's messing with you? Because I did the latter, and that's when things started to get worse. There were wet streaks along the hallway tiles, as if someone had just mopped the floor in a rush. They led toward the old auditorium, the one that hadn't been used in over a decade. That place always gave me the creeps. The school shut it down after a ceiling collapse injured a few students years ago. They sealed the double doors, but one of them never closed properly. The water trail ended there. When I pushed the door open, the smell hit me first. Damp wood, mold, and something like old sweat. My flashlight beam cut across rows of dusty seats, all facing the half-collapsed stage. And right there, in the center aisle, that same mop bucket. Except now it wasn't empty. The water inside was murky, thick, and something was floating in it. A soaked piece of uniform cloth. I leaned closer and realized it was the same type of shirt I wore. My badge logo, my name tag. but my uniform was still on me. That's when I started remembering something I'd heard from one of the older custodians, Miguel, before he quit. He once told me, "Don't ever take the night shift in that building alone. The last guy who did never clocked out." At the time, I thought he was joking, but now that sentence won't leave my mind. I checked the employee board in the office later that morning. Turns out there was another custodian assigned to this building years ago. His name was Frank Halderman. He'd been working the North Wing alone when he disappeared in 1999. They said he quit, but there were no resignation papers. Just an unreturned mop and a missing time card. After that, I started hearing noises almost every night. The sound of a mop handle dragging across tiles behind me. Buckets rolling by themselves when I wasn't looking. Even faint humming, like someone cleaning and humming an old tune from a different time. It wasn't loud, it was just steady. And then it started answering me. I'd talk out loud just to break the silence. Sometimes I'd say things like, "All right, last hallway, then we're done." And faintly, too faint to be real, I'd hear it repeat, "Done." One night I decided to record it. I set my phone on the floor, microphone on, near the janitor's closet where the noises always came from. The recording lasted 2 hours. When I played it back the next morning, I heard myself walking, mopping, and then another set of footsteps. Right behind mine, matching every step. But what froze me wasn't that. It was the last 10 seconds when the sound stopped and a voice, low, strained, hissed right into the mic. "You missed a spot." That was the night I realized I wasn't working alone anymore. I didn't sleep after listening to that recording. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still hear that voice, gravelly, soaked in fatigue. "You missed a spot." It sounded tired, like someone who'd been cleaning forever. When I went back to work that night, I tried to tell myself it was just audio distortion, a trick of sound bouncing through the hallways. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I'd worked those floors long enough to know the rhythm of every creak and echo in that building. This voice was new. I became obsessed with finding where it came from. I started showing up an hour early. I'd leave my cart by the main entrance and walk the halls with a small recorder tucked into my shirt pocket. Each night, the noises got closer. Mops squeaking, metal pails rolling, faint humming that seemed to mimic whatever tune was stuck in my head. By the fourth night, I noticed something impossible. Every time I cleaned a hallway, by the time I looped back, it was dirty again. Footprints in fresh mop water, smudges on windows I'd just wiped clean. Like someone was undoing my work the moment I turned away. And here's the thing that scared me most. Those footprints weren't mine. They were bare. Around 2 a.m., I heard movement from the storage closet again. Not knocking this time. Scraping. The sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. I took my flashlight and opened the door slowly. Inside was that same mop. Only now, it was standing upright in the center of the room, hanging resting against nothing. No bucket, no support, just standing there like someone invisible was holding it. I stepped back and shut the door. Locked it. Didn't even clean the rest of that hallway. When I came back the next night, the lock was broken. The next day, I decided to check the old maintenance logs stored in the basement filing room. Just to distract myself, maybe find something about that missing custodian, Frank Halderman. The files were yellowed and brittle, dates written in fading ink. I found his record, Night Custodian, 1995 to 1999. Beside his termination entry, there was a note scribbled by hand. Do not assign solo shifts to Building C. The subject complains of co-worker that isn't there. Claims he's cleaning the same halls twice. Reassigned to daytime duties pending review. No follow-up entry, no end date. Just a blank space where the next record should have been. Pause, I'll let that sit. I ran my finger down the edge of the file and felt something folded inside. A scrap of lined paper. Same handwriting. It read, "If you hear him humming, don't answer." That same night, I didn't even make it to my second hallway before I heard it again. A low hum echoing through the vents. It was slow, almost like a lullaby. And, just like the note warned, it was waiting for me to respond. I stood in the dark hallway, lights flickering above, trying to hold my breath. The humming stopped. And then, a second hum, this one coming from behind me. I turned my flashlight and saw a reflection in the window. Not a face, just the outline of a janitor, bent over a mop, moving in perfect rhythm to the sound. But the floor he was cleaning wasn't reflecting me. It was reflecting an older version of the hallway. Rusted lockers, outdated posters, everything like it looked back in the 90s. When I blinked, the reflection was gone, but the floor beneath my feet was wet again. You ever have that moment where you realize you might be part of something old? Something that doesn't care if you exist or not? Would you have stayed and tried to finish your shift, or just walked out? Because at that point, I couldn't tell which one would have been worse. After that, things got personal. Every night, my cleaning cart would be in a different spot when I turned around. My name badge went missing, then reappeared hanging from the janitor's closet handle. And then the mop, the one that never belonged to me, started showing up beside my cart as if we were partners. I tried reporting it, but security brushed it off, said maybe another custodian was helping out without logging in. Only problem, there wasn't another night custodian assigned. On a Friday night, I decided to set up my phone camera facing the closet, just to prove I wasn't losing it. At 1:13 a.m., the light in the hallway dimmed, like something passed right in front of the sensor, and the mop handle moved. Slowly, it tilted, dipped into the bucket, and began swaying side to side, cleaning nothing. And then, something stepped into frame. A hand, wrinkled, wet, holding the handle. The phone fell sideways after that, but before it hit the floor, I caught a glimpse of a badge on that soaked uniform. It said F. Halderman. After that night, I didn't go back. I called in sick for a week, told myself I'd quit, but the weirdest part was, the school didn't call me. No HR, no supervisor, no one asking about missed shifts. When I finally returned to collect my things, my ID wouldn't scan. The security guard looked at me like I was lying when I said I worked nights. He checked the roster, said there hadn't been a night custodian for months. I asked him, then who's been signing off on the cleaning reports? He shrugged and said, whoever it is, they've been doing a damn good job. I don't work there anymore. I don't work anywhere at night now. But sometimes when I clean up around my apartment late, I still hear that faint squeak of a mop handle on tile. Always just outside the room I'm in. Always stopping the moment I look up. So tell me, if you were in my shoes, would you keep working that night shift, knowing someone or something was working right beside you? Or would you quit and never look back? I really want to know. Drop your answer in the comments below, because sometimes the things that stay behind in empty buildings only stay quiet when someone listens. I worked as a night orderly at St. Raymond's Community Hospital, an old building that had gone through several expansions and renovations over the years. The main floors were modern and bright, but the basement, it was a different world entirely. We were told from day one that the basement was off limits after hours. Officially, it was because of old wiring and unstable flooring. Unofficially, no one wanted to go down there. When I first started, I didn't question it. Hospitals always have restricted areas, morgues, storage, maintenance zones. But what bothered me was how serious everyone became when the basement was mentioned. Even the head nurse, who never seemed afraid of anything, once told me, if you hear something from down there, you didn't. I thought she was joking. It was the kind of hospital that always felt half awake. Old floors, creaky vents, fluorescent lights that hummed more than they glowed. On night shifts, it was just me, a few nurses, and the security guard, Don. Around 2 a.m., most nights were quiet. The kind of silence that made you hear the machines breathing, the IV pumps, the monitors, the faint clink of a metal tray settling. But that night, the silence was different. I was restocking linens near the south stairwell when I heard a cart rolling on tile. Slow, uneven, like one wheel was loose. It came from the direction of the basement stairs. The thing is, there shouldn't have been any cart stored down there. I went to the stairwell and turned on my flashlight. The door at the top of the basement steps was propped open by a piece of wood. That was unusual. It was always locked. I called for Don on the radio. No answer. So I leaned over the railing and called out, "Hello? Anyone down there?" No response, just the faint sound of a wheel squeaking as it rolled further away. When I turned to leave, I noticed something that stopped me. A faint red light glowed from the bottom of the stairs. Not the kind of light from an emergency bulb. More like the glow of an old exit sign. But there was no exit sign in that direction. An hour later, I found Don in the break room. I told him what I heard and he froze mid-sip of his coffee. He said, "Stay away from that stairwell. I'm serious. They sealed that basement for a reason." I asked why, and he hesitated. Finally, he said the hospital used to have a long-term care wing down there. Decades ago, for patients with severe mental decline. The wing was closed after a fire in the late 1980s. According to Don, not everyone got out. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't press. But that detail stuck with me. A week later, the night was busier than usual. Multiple admissions, short staff. I was sent to grab more saline boxes from supply storage. The main closet was empty. The next backup supply? Down the south corridor, right beside the basement door. When I reached the stairwell, I noticed it again. That faint red light under the doorframe. The wood that had kept it open before was gone, but the door itself was slightly ajar. I didn't go in. I just leaned closer, trying to see if someone had a flashlight down there. That's when I heard it. A gurney wheel squeaking again, followed by a soft thud, like someone pushing through an old door. Then the air changed, colder, heavy, like stepping into a refrigeration unit. My radio crackled suddenly. It was Nurse Jenna from the third floor, asking if I was in the basement hallway. When I told her I wasn't, she paused and said, "Then who's moving the patient lift down there? It's showing up on the motion tracker." We both went quiet, because there wasn't supposed to be any motion sensors active in the basement. They were disconnected years ago. I made the mistake of going down there that night. I told myself it was just malfunctioning equipment, maybe a maintenance worker doing after-hours checks. I didn't even tell Don. I just grabbed a flashlight and pushed open the door. The first thing that hit me was the smell. A mix of mildew and cleaning chemicals that hadn't been used in decades. The tiles were cracked, the walls lined with old patient nameplates, some half-burnt from the fire. My light caught something metallic on the floor. An overturned tray rusted over. Next to it was a hospital bracelet, so faded you could barely read the name. Further down, the hallway opened into what looked like an old ward. Empty bed frames, curtain rods hanging like skeleton arms. Then, the cart. The one I'd been hearing all week. It was standing perfectly still in the middle of the hallway. Its wheel, the one that squeaked, slowly rotated on its own, like something had just stopped pushing it. My flashlight flickered once, and when it came back, the cart had moved closer. I didn't wait. I dropped the light, turned, and sprinted back upstairs, slamming the door shut behind me. When I radioed Don, I was shaking so badly I could barely talk. He didn't ask what I saw. He just said, "Now you know why we don't go down there." The next day, the stairwell was sealed again. New lock, new chain, no explanation. The official report said, "Unauthorized entry into an unsafe area." A month later, I transferred to another hospital, but I still dream about that hallway sometimes. The flicker of the red light, the sound of that single wheel turning. If you ever work in a hospital and they tell you a place is off limits, take their word for it, Because sometimes the warnings aren't about safety protocols, they're about keeping the past where it belongs. Have you ever sat in a room so quiet that you could hear your own pulse? That was me. 2 a.m. under flickering lights, waiting for a phone to ring that wasn't supposed to. It all started so normally. I worked for a small tech company in the downtown district. The building had 8 floors, but after 9 p.m., only one remained lit. Ours, the 7th floor. Customer support after hours. My job was simple. Answer calls, log issues, send reports. Between calls, I'd scroll through messages, sip coffee that tasted like burned paper, and count the hours until sunrise. The space was massive, 60 cubicles, all in identical rows. Each desk had the same setup: monitor, keyboard, headset, and one black phone with a tiny digital screen. When the phone wasn't ringing, its silence filled the whole floor. For the first few weeks, it felt peaceful, the kind of quiet you think you can control. But quiet is deceptive. It lets you hear the small things: the air conditioner ticking on and off, the faint echo of pipes, the way fluorescent lights buzz like trapped insects. After a while, you start hearing more than you should. The first call came at 2:14 a.m. I remember because the clock on my monitor froze at that exact second. The display on the phone flashed, "Internal line 004. We only had 3 internal lines. Still, I answered. "Support desk, this is Alex." No reply, just static, faint, rhythmic. I waited, thinking it was a glitch. Then a soft click. The line went dead. I checked the logs. No entry, no timestamp, no trace. A system error, I told myself. But it happened again the next night. Same time, same line. This time the call stayed connected longer. 10 seconds of silence, then breathing. Faint, uneven, too close to the mic. I tried to speak again. "Hello? Can you hear me?" Click. Disconnected. When I checked the call history again, it was blank. Over the next week, the calls kept coming, always from that same non-existent line. The breathing continued. But then, it began to sync with mine. Every inhale, every exhale, perfectly mirrored. I recorded one of the calls. When I played it back later, I watched the waveform and realized the breathing wasn't just in sync. It was mine. Somehow, the call had captured the exact rhythm of my own breathing from earlier in the night. That's when I started noticing other things. My monitor flickered once every few hours, always when the phones went dead silent. One night I caught a glimpse of movement in the reflection of the screen, a faint shape standing 2 cubicles behind me. I turned. Nothing. The next morning I checked the security footage. Our cameras looped every 6 hours, but the timestamp from that moment, 2:14 a.m., was missing. Then came the night of the storm, rain against the windows, wind shaking the vents. The power flickered, once, twice, and for a few seconds the room was pitch black. When the emergency lights kicked on, every phone in the office began to ring. 50 phones, ringing in perfect rhythm. The sound was deafening, all in unison, all flashing the same caller ID, internal line 004. I stood there frozen, trying to process what I was seeing. Finally, I picked one up. Static. I picked up another. Static. But by the 5th phone, I heard something else. Low. Garbled. Voice. It sounded like a recording played through layers of distortion. Then one clear word came through. My name. I slammed the phone down. All the lines went dead at once. The silence that followed was worse than the ringing. I ran to the server room. The system monitor showed no active calls, but one connection was still open. The source? Desk 27. That was my station. I walked slowly back down the hallway. Every light buzzed overhead, flickering like it was struggling to stay awake. When I reached my desk, my headset was off the hook. The line was open. I lifted it, hands shaking. What I heard wasn't static this time. It was my own voice from earlier that night, replaying word for word. "Support desk, this is Alex speaking." Then breathing, then footsteps. On the recording, they were getting closer. And then, they stopped right behind where I was standing. I dropped the phone, but the sound didn't stop. It kept playing, even after I pulled the cable from the wall. I grabbed my jacket and ran. Didn't log out, didn't shut anything down. When I came back the next morning with my supervisor, the phones were silent. The call logs showed nothing, except for one entry. A continuous internal connection, still active, originating from desk 27. He tried to delete it. The system wouldn't allow it. It's still active to this day. I checked last month. The connection time reads 2:14 a.m., ongoing. It's been over a year since I quit that job. I moved 3 cities away. Tell me, if you were in my position, would you pick up? If this story made you think twice about working the night shift alone, let me know in the comments. Would you have stayed to trace the call or walked away like I did? I used to work night security at a mid-sized shopping mall in Ohio. It wasn't a big city mall, just 2 floors, about 100 stores, and a food court that always smelled faintly of old fries no matter how much they cleaned it. The job was simple. Walk the corridors every hour, check the entrances, make sure no kids broke in to skate or mess around, and report any broken lights. The mannequins never used to bother me. They were just part of the scenery. Lifeless forms in display windows, dressed in clothes that rotated every few weeks. But over time, I started noticing something I couldn't explain. They weren't always where they should have been. The mall closed at 9 p.m. Most tenants left by 9:30. By 10:00, it was just me, the maintenance guy, and a janitor named Felix. Our office was next to the main security feed. 12 cameras showing every corner of the place. Usually the footage was quiet. Empty hallways, dark stores, the faint hum of air conditioning. One night around 1 a.m., I was doing my second patrol. Everything looked normal until I passed the old clothing boutique on the lower floor. Dress Haven. They had a new window setup. 3 mannequins arranged in a summer theme, with bright dresses and wide-brimmed hats. Except, one of them was facing the wrong direction. I stopped for a moment, checked the glass reflection. Her head was turned slightly toward the hallway, like it had been repositioned to watch whoever passed by. I figured someone bumped it earlier, maybe during cleaning, but when I came back around 30 minutes later, it had moved again. This time, it was facing the other way. Over the next week, I started keeping notes. Every night after midnight, something small would change. A mannequin's arm bent differently. A scarf that was hanging off one shoulder would be gone, then back the next night. One had its hand pressed against the glass, like it was trying to push out. I even told Felix, the janitor. He laughed it off at first, said, "Maybe I was just tired." But on Thursday, he came into the office pale-faced. He told me that when he was waxing the floor outside Dress Haven, he saw one of the mannequins tilt slightly, like someone had brushed past it. He swore there was no draft, no vibration, nothing that could have moved it. We checked the security footage. Nothing. The cameras showed the same still display. No motion, no distortion, just silence. That Friday, the store owner came in to change the display for the weekend. She brought 2 assistants and worked for about 3 hours. When she left, the mannequins were reset into new poses. But later that night, when I passed the store again, the display didn't match what I saw earlier. The mannequins were turned inward, all 3 facing the dark back of the store. It felt intentional, like they were looking at something or someone inside. The lights in Dress Haven were motion activated, so when I stopped to look, they flickered on. The mannequins were still, unmoving, but one had its arm extended toward the far corner of the shop. There was nothing there, just an empty fitting room curtain slightly swaying. When I stepped closer to the glass, I noticed fingerprints on the inside of the display window. Long streaks, smeared like someone had pressed their palms and slid them downward. Mannequins don't leave prints. 2 nights later, it got worse. Around 2:17 a.m., the motion alarm triggered from Dress Haven. The feed on the monitor showed faint movement, a shifting shadow that crossed the display area, slow and uneven. I thought it might be a break-in, so I grabbed my flashlight and went down. When I reached the store, the lights were already on. All 3 mannequins were now outside the display, standing several feet back, near the center of the store floor. They weren't broken, they weren't knocked over. They were standing upright, perfectly balanced, facing the fitting rooms. I froze. No sound, no movement, just the quiet hum of the lights overhead. I stepped closer to the window and saw it, faint drag marks on the tile floor, leading from the display area to where they stood now. Then the light at the back of the store flickered once. The curtain in the fitting room rippled as if someone had stepped behind it. That was enough for me. I reported it as a malfunctioning motion sensor and returned to the control room, shaking. But when I replayed the security feed, my stomach dropped. The mannequins never moved on camera. One frame, they were in the window. The next frame, they were in the middle of the store. No transition, no blur, no interference, just gone from one spot and standing in another. The next morning, Dress Haven didn't open. By noon, the owner arrived with 2 men and sealed the entire storefront with brown paper. A week later, it was empty. Sign taken down, lease terminated. No one ever said why. A few weeks after, Felix quit without notice. When I asked him why, he just said, "You've seen them move too, haven't you?" and walked away. I stayed a few more months, but every night around 2 a.m., I'd catch myself glancing at that closed storefront. Even after the shop was gone, sometimes the motion sensor light would flicker on by itself. And once, just once, I could swear I saw 3 faint shapes standing behind that brown paper, perfectly still, like they were waiting for someone to come closer. Working nights teaches you a lot about silence and what hides inside it. If you ever find yourself alone in a mall after midnight, don't linger near the displays. Some things are made to look lifelike for a reason, and sometimes they remember what they were meant to be. Every building tells its own story when it's empty. The air gets heavy, the light feels colder, and if you stay long enough, you start to realize the cameras. They don't just record, they watch. I learned that the hard way. For 5 years, I worked night security at a mid-sized office complex on the edge of town. Wilcox Corporate Plaza, 3 towers, 34 floors total. At night, it was just me, the cameras, and the quiet hum of the air conditioning. It was supposed to be easy, until one shift changed everything. By the end of the story, you'll understand why I can't look at surveillance footage anymore. Not even in movies. Because once you've seen what I saw, you start to wonder if cameras really capture the truth or something else entirely. It was February 3rd, 2022, a Thursday night, snow outside, silent city. The kind of night where everything feels paused. My shift started at 10:01 p.m. sharp. I walked through the empty lobby, the echo of my boots bouncing off marble floors. The daytime staff had already gone home. Only one cleaning crew remained, 2 janitors on the lower floors, a guy named Derek and his niece Lydia. My post was in the control room, a narrow space tucked behind the elevators, lined with 12 monitors showing live feeds from every floor, stairwell, parking lot, and hallway. 12 cameras, 12 sets of eyes. And for years, I thought they told me everything I needed to know about the building. But that night, they started showing me something else. At 12:16 a.m., I noticed camera 9, the feed from the east stairwell. Flicker. Just static, half a second. Nothing unusual. We had old wiring in that section. It happened all the time. But then it happened again, and again, every 47 seconds exactly. Each time the image flickered, the camera's timestamp froze for a moment, like it skipped a frame, and then resumed. Perfectly regular. I wrote it down on the log sheet. Camera 9. Consistent interference. Patterned. When I called maintenance, they said no other camera was affected, just that one, the east stairwell. I remember joking with Derek later over the radio, told him the stairwell must be haunted. He just laughed and said, "If ghosts pay rent, I'll hand them a mop." We both chuckled. It felt good. Normal. But even as I said it, I kept staring at that flickering feed. It wasn't just random noise, it felt like a rhythm. By 1:03 a.m., the cleaning crew had clocked out. I was alone. That's when I noticed movement on camera 9 again, something shifting in the far corner of the stairwell, the section under the landing that the light never fully reached. It wasn't clear enough to make out details, just a darker patch, like a shadow standing where no shadow should be. I zoomed the camera. The image distorted for a split second, then sharpened. The corner was empty. I let it go. But a few minutes later, my radio crackled. "Control, this is front desk. You still on feed?" It was the overnight building manager, Alan. He only called if something triggered the motion sensors. I replied, "Yeah, all good here." He said, "You sure? Stairwell alarm just tripped. East side." I looked back at the monitor, camera 9, and froze. The feed wasn't showing the stairwell anymore. It was showing me, sitting in the control room, staring at the screen. I reached for the controls immediately, flipping between cameras. All the others worked fine. Only camera 9 had changed. It was no longer live. It was mirroring me. And the strangest part? There was no camera in that direction that could see inside the control room. I waved my hand experimentally. The figure on camera 9 waved back, except there was a half-second delay. I zoomed in on the timestamp in the corner of the feed. It didn't match the system clock. It was 4 minutes ahead, meaning whatever I was seeing hadn't happened yet. You know that cold wave that hits you when your brain tries to explain something, but can't? That was me, staring at a future version of myself on a camera that shouldn't exist. And then the figure on the screen, the me that was 4 minutes ahead, turned his head toward the stairwell monitor, the one showing camera 9. And he stood up, so I waited. I watched myself sitting there, knowing in 4 minutes I'd stand, turn, and walk out the door. And sure enough, I did. Not because I wanted to, but because something in me needed to confirm what was real. The corridor to the east stairwell always smelled like cleaning fluid and cold metal. My footsteps echoed. Everything looked normal at first. Concrete steps, steel railings, overhead light flickering every few seconds. But as I reached the second landing, I heard something above me, the faint click of another camera adjusting focus. Except there wasn't a camera installed in that stairwell. I'd know. I'd walked it hundreds of times. I looked up. Nothing. Then a soft mechanical sound from the lower level, like the rotation of a camera lens refocusing. I turned back toward the control room and noticed something odd. The stairwell door I came through was slightly open. A faint blue glow leaked through the crack. I stepped closer. It was coming from the monitor room, down the hall. Every screen inside was flashing between feeds, cycling fast, faster than I'd ever seen, like they were being manually switched. But no one was there. And then on camera 9, I saw a shape walking up the stairs, slowly, step by step. It wasn't me. This person was wearing my uniform, but the badge was on the opposite side of the chest. What would you do in that moment? Would you rush back to the control room to check the feed? Or would you stay still to see if the figure kept climbing? Because I did the second one, and that's how I learned there are moments where staying still feels louder than any scream. The footsteps stopped 1 floor below me, and the stairwell camera feed glitched. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification, a security alert from the motion sensors, time-stamped 4 minutes in the future. The same delay. By the time I looked back at the monitor inside the control room, camera 9 showed me standing in the stairwell, looking terrified. The exact position I was in right now. Only difference? The me on the screen wasn't alone anymore. There was someone standing just behind him. I ran back to the control room. The hall lights dimmed for a second as if the power dipped. And when I burst through the door, the screens all froze at once. Every feed, every floor, every hallway, except camera 9. It was showing the empty stairwell again, but the timestamp was now 5 minutes ahead, and at the bottom of the stairs, a shape was lying motionless. I didn't know what else to do that night. I couldn't leave. The system logs who's on duty, and if I bailed early, I'd lose the only job that was paying my bills. So I stayed, but I changed one thing. I turned every single monitor off except one. Just the main hallway feed, the one closest to my office. I figured if something was off, I'd rather face it there than keep watching those screens full of empty rooms that felt too aware of me. At around 3 a.m., I heard the sound again, not from the cameras this time. It came from inside the building, the actual hallway. It was faint, dragging, like the soft scrape of something sliding on concrete. A broom handle, maybe, or a shoe. I leaned back from the monitor and just listened. My heartbeat matched the blinking red light on the camera system. Each pulse, one flash. Each breath, one more second of waiting. Then I noticed movement. On the feed. At the far end of the hallway, right beneath the fluorescent light that kept flickering, something shifted. It wasn't fast. It wasn't sudden. It was slow, almost deliberate. I thought it was a person at first, but the figure, if it was one, didn't have the usual proportions. It was too long in one direction and too still in the other. And then the lights went out for a split second. When they came back, whatever was there had moved closer. I froze. The distance on the feed was maybe 30 feet. But when I turned my head toward the real hallway window beside me, nothing. Just the reflection of my own face staring back, eyes wide. I remember thinking, maybe it's an error, a glitch in the feed. I checked the timestamp. The feed wasn't delayed. It was live. And that's when I heard it. 3 knocks on the office door. They weren't loud, just measured, as if whoever or whatever was outside knew I was counting them. I stood up and just stared at the doorknob. It didn't move. The knocks didn't come again. I checked the monitor, and the feed was black. All the cameras had switched off by themselves, every single one. That had never happened before. The building ran on backup power, even during outages, and I hadn't touched a thing. I reached for the breaker panel, thinking maybe I could reset the feed. Before I did, the monitors turned back on. Every one of them. And all of them, every single camera, was showing the same thing. My office door, dozens of angles that didn't exist. Every feed had become a reflection of right now, of me, standing in front of that door. I felt the air go colder, not in a dramatic way, but like when you open a freezer and stand too close. I remember saying, this can't be real, but it was, because when I moved my hand in front of me, the screens all moved a fraction of a second after, as if the cameras were watching, just a little slower than they should. A delay, a hesitation, like something was watching me from inside the feed, copying what I did, but just a moment behind. I reached for the main power switch, and then one monitor flickered to a new feed. Storage room 3. A place I'd never checked before. The feed was grainy, half fogged. But there was something in there. In the center of the room stood a tall, narrow shape covered by a tarp. It was the same outline I'd seen earlier in the hallway. The camera zoomed in by itself. I didn't even touch the controls. And for a moment I could swear the tarp moved, like something underneath it adjusted its posture. I left the office, grabbed my flashlight, and told myself I'd just take one look, prove it was nothing, and go home. The storage rooms were down a long corridor that didn't have working lights. The company never bothered replacing the bulbs since no one used that section. My footsteps echoed louder than they should have, hollow, mismatched. When I reached storage room 3, I saw the tarp. It was exactly like on the camera. Tall, human-shaped, standing in the middle of the floor. I stayed at the doorway, just pointing my flashlight at it. It didn't move, didn't sway, didn't make a sound. But the flashlight's beam began to flicker. I smacked it against my palm, once, twice. The beam came back, and that's when I noticed something on the floor. Footprints, bare, leading toward the tarp, and stopping there. I followed the trail with the light, and realized there were also outgoing prints, faint, leading back toward the door, where I was standing. That's when the tarp shifted again, this time enough to push a small gust of air toward me. I stumbled back, slammed the door shut, and sprinted down the hallway. The sound of the tarp sliding off something followed behind me, that slow, dragging sound again. I didn't look back, not once. When I reached the office, every monitor was filled with static, except one, the hallway feed. It showed me running. But in the feed, I wasn't running toward the camera. I was walking slowly, back the way I came, and I wasn't alone. There was another shape walking right beside me, tall, covered, the same height as the tarp. But here's the part that still makes no sense. When I replayed the footage the next day, it wasn't there. All the cameras were blank between 2:59 and 3:20 a.m. Like those minutes never existed. The maintenance logs didn't show power loss, no system error, no explanation. But I wasn't imagining it, because that morning, when the next shift came in, one of them asked me, "Hey, were you down in storage room 3 last night?" I said no, and they just nodded slowly and said, "Then why's the tarp on the floor? And why are there 2 sets of wet footprints leading out?" I quit that job a week later. I told everyone I found a better offer, but the truth is I couldn't stand the thought of watching another empty hallway again. Sometimes when I pass a building at night and see the faint glow of a security monitor through the window, I wonder if someone else is watching those same halls right now, and if maybe they'll start seeing delays too. If you were in my position that night, would you have checked storage room 3 or turned off the cameras and walked away? Let me know what you think, because after what I saw, I'm still not sure I made the right choice. I still keep that receipt in my wallet, not because I want to, but because no one at the company believes it ever existed. It's dated 2 years before I even worked there. My name's on it, my signature, and the timestamp, exactly the minute I looked up and realized I wasn't the only one inside that station. By the time I figured out whose receipt that was, it was already printing again. I worked nights at a 24-hour gas station just outside of town. One of those highway-side spots where the lights attract more moths than customers after midnight. I handled the counter, the register, and the fuel pumps. Solo. The only company I had was the constant buzz of the coolers, the flicker of the sign outside, and the security cameras that sometimes glitched when trucks passed. Most nights were uneventful. Drivers came in for cigarettes, a snack, maybe gas, paid, left. Silence again. That night felt no different, until I opened the cash register log. Each shift, we print a reconciliation receipt, a list of every transaction, time-stamped and signed. When I started my shift, the previous one had signed out properly, but below his entry was another one. It read, Clerk ID 13, 2:37 a.m. That was my ID. The problem? It was already printed when I arrived at 10 p.m. I thought it was an error, maybe an old test log, but the date was today. I called my manager, no answer. So I checked the CCTV playback from earlier in the evening. The footage ran normally until around 2:37 a.m., the same time on the receipt. Then the screen glitched, just one frame skipped, and when it came back, someone was standing behind the counter. Same uniform, same name tag, same haircut. I leaned closer. The clerk on the screen looked exactly like me. He was ringing up a purchase for a customer, a man in a dark jacket, head lowered. They exchanged cash. The printer spat out a receipt, and then the lights flickered. The feed froze for 2 seconds, then resumed, with the counter empty again. That footage shouldn't exist. I wasn't there at that time, and no one else had access to my login. I rewound, paused, zoomed, every frame identical to my movements, down to how I hold a pen between my fingers. Then I noticed something else. The cooler doors in the background were fogged, and on the glass, faintly visible in condensation, were handprints, not recent ones. They looked pressed from the inside. I walked to the coolers. The handprints were gone, but one of the doors, and the last one at the end, was slightly open. Inside, a single bottle of water sat on the middle shelf with a receipt stuck to the glass. I peeled it off. Date, 2 years ago. Time, 2:37 a.m. Cashier, my full name. Item, 1 bottle of water. I hadn't even lived in this town 2 years ago. I went back to the register, opened the transaction log, and the same purchase appeared. Timestamp identical, except now the clerk ID wasn't mine. It was blank. At that moment, the receipt printer started feeding paper again. No one had pressed a button, no sale was active, but the machine kept printing slowly, 1 line at a time, like it was retyping something that had already happened. The text appeared as it printed. Shift 64 initiated. Clerk ID 13 confirmed. Transaction 1, water, customer confirmed. Repeat. The paper ran out. I went to the back office to shut the system down. The monitors showed live feeds from the pumps, aisles, and entrance. On pump 3, a car was parked. Engine off, headlights dim. A man stepped out, dark jacket, head lowered, just like the one from the footage. He walked toward the door, but the door sensor didn't beep. The glass didn't move. He stopped just outside and looked up, straight at the camera. The feed cut to static. When it came back, the man was gone. But inside the store, the cooler door was now wide open. The temperature alarm went off. Beep, beep, beep. I grabbed the keys and ran to shut it. The cold air hit me hard. Too cold. The kind of cold that hurts your lungs when you breathe. There were no bottles left inside, just the empty shelf and a torn piece of receipt paper lying flat. I picked it up. It said, "Return complete, 2:37 a.m." I quit that job the next morning. The manager reviewed the footage, said it must have been recording overlap. But he couldn't explain why my ID appeared on 2 different dates, or why the system kept auto-generating shift 64 every few nights, even after the hardware was replaced. If you ever work a late shift and a receipt prints with your name before your shift even starts, what would you do? Would you tear it up and ignore it, or check what it's trying to repeat? Tell me in the comments. And if you keep one of those receipts, just make sure the timestamp doesn't match something that hasn't happened yet. You ever check a list and realize there's a name that shouldn't be there? That's how my last night at the warehouse started. Our system showed 5 employees clocked in. There were only 4 of us on the schedule. By the end of that shift, I learned that number wasn't a glitch. And if you've ever worked alone at night, you'll understand why I don't anymore. Keep listening, because once you hear who that 5th employee was, you'll understand why the company never reopened that branch. I worked nights at a distribution warehouse just off Highway 47. Concrete walls, flickering sodium lights, and air that always smelled faintly of dust and oil. We handled late deliveries, mostly unloading trucks and logging packages. On that particular Thursday, we were short-staffed. 3 loaders, 1 floor supervisor, and me, the system operator. Everything ran off a digital punch-in system. You scan your badge, your name lights up green, and it logs the time. Simple. But that night, when I checked the dashboard, I saw 5 names active. Mine, the 3 loaders, the supervisor, and 1 more. Employee number 6047, L. Harlan. No picture, no department, just the timestamp. Clocked in at 8:12 p.m. Thing is, No one had used the scanner after 8:07. I thought it was leftover data from another shift, maybe a software hiccup. I even joked about it over the intercom. But when I called roll, everyone answered, except L. Harlan. Our supervisor, Dean, shrugged it off. Probably an admin code from corporate, he said. Run your usual checks, we'll finish the west aisle before midnight. Fine. Around 10:30, I started the camera review. Standard routine. The aisles were quiet, forklifts parked, conveyor belts humming. Then I noticed something in aisle 9. A pallet was moving, just slightly. A slow, steady push, as if someone was trying to slide it back into position. None of the loaders were near that section. I zoomed in. The camera lost focus for a moment, and when it cleared, the pallet was perfectly aligned. No figure, no motion. But the sensor lights above it had turned on, which only happens when someone passes underneath. I radioed the team. Anyone in aisle 9? No response at first, then Dean's voice. We're still in aisle 2. Why? That's when I saw it. A shadow, faint but visible, crossing from one side of aisle 9 to the other. Too tall to be a loader, too quick for the cleaning bots. I paused the feed and checked the employee list again. Employee number 6047 was still green. Active, logged in, location, aisle 9. The system was tracking movement, except there was no ID badge scanning the gates. I grabbed a handheld radio and went to check it myself. The further I walked, the quieter the place got. Even the hum of the machine seemed to fade. Aisle 9 looked ordinary at first. Stacks of boxes, 2 forklifts, one turned slightly askew. I ran the light scanner. It registered 2 heat signatures. One was me. The other stood right behind the second forklift. I called out, "Hello? Warehouse security? You're not supposed to be here." No reply. The handheld scanner blinked twice, then dropped to a single reading. Whoever was there just stopped registering. I walked to the forklift. Nothing behind it. No footprints in the dust. I headed back to the control office and replayed the camera feed again. This time, there was a person visible, faint, partially transparent, walking in the opposite direction of my flashlight beam. The system auto-tagged them as employee 6047. That's impossible. Only live employees get motion tag IDs. I printed the timestamp anyway. When Dean came in around 1 a.m., I showed him the footage. He leaned over the monitor and said, "That's impossible. Harlan's been gone for months." "Gone?" I asked. "Transferred?" He shook his head slowly. "No. He died. Heart failure. Right there on aisle 9. We just never updated the records." I waited for him to laugh, to say he was joking. He didn't. I minimized the footage and saw the live feed behind it. In the background of the office camera, through the glass window, a figure was walking past. Same shape, same pace, moving toward aisle 9 again. Dean turned, but by the time he did, nothing was there. We ran the roster log one more time. Employee number 6047's tag blinked off at exactly 3:04 a.m. The same time, according to Dean, that Harlan's time of death had been recorded 2 months earlier. We never filed a report. Dean said corporate wouldn't believe it and would just wipe the tapes. But I kept one copy, a small external drive labeled Shift Log 52. I tried playing it at home the next day. The footage opened normally until the timestamp hit 3:04. Then the screen filled with static and a single frame appeared. It wasn't the warehouse, it was the office. My chair. Empty. In the access panel showed employee Chalker 60147 active. I unplugged the drive immediately. Since then, every time I pass a scanner or digital clock-in terminal, it flickers for a moment, like it's reading another badge at the same time. The company shut down that warehouse 6 months later after unexplained system errors. But if you ever work a night shift and you see one more name on the list than there should be, don't assume it's a glitch, because maybe someone never clocked out. If you saw an extra name on your night shift roster, would you stay and check the cameras? Or walk away and risk losing your job? Tell me in the comments. And next time you badge in for work, watch for that extra green light. Some stories don't end. They wait. You'll see what I mean next time, if you're still here. This is Mr. Midnight Fears, where the dark never really sleeps. Subscribe before the next one wakes.